podcast Fast Forward by HTEC Group. It will be a pleasure to share, the five animals, the big five, let's say, of growth and of the Fast Forward. And I think that there's so many things that you can share with us. It will be pleasure to talk to you about this. Can you tell us about, just for the start, something about you? Just we can share from this perspective. Yeah.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Nico, and to have this conversation. Let's see. I'm a reforming consultant and a reforming analyst. So prior to starting Leaf, I spent a couple, 18 odd years working in transportation, trying to apply technology, providing services. So I have a lot of an appreciation for how hard this problem is, how hard people work at this problem on a daily basis, and how big a deal it is to have transportation, not just in our companies, but in our society, work a lot better than it does today. And so my personal motivation, my mission for Leaf is to try to contribute something that isn't just an incremental band-aid on sort of broken things that work today, but work pretty poorly. It's actually to imagine a new way of working that would actually serve the people who do this work every day, because, in some ways I've been one of them for a while, but also that would serve all of us better as just people who share the world with the transportation industry when the industry works differently.
Great. And to start with the global picture, with the first of the animals, with the Black Swan from Nassim Taleb, how to fast forward globally. We were talking, and it's great that his work great. So maybe from perspective of which trends outside of your industry do you see moving fast forward, or how do you see the theory of Nassim Taleb yourself?
Yeah. So I think Nassim Taleb is a very special thinker, and it's always fascinating to read his work. I actually love his more recent work around anti-fragility, and the idea that our systems, and transportation and supply chain is certainly one of them, are actually inherently brittle and pretty fragile. And so instead of trying to band-aid our way through and hope for a better future, we should be thinking about how to build more anti-fragile systems, the systems that actually get better through crisis. And what's great about the Black Swan, I think, as a concept, is that everyone can appreciate, none of us really had a crystal ball for the global pandemic. But
Exactly.
building a business to build a crystal ball is, maybe some people want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to build a crystal ball. I just want to be prepared the next time there's a crisis. And in transportation, a hurricane is a crisis. The COVID is a crisis because it forced a lot of shippers to shut down, parts of their supply chain overnight. And it's just as hard to start those supply chains back up. All of these are storms. If you're a transportation person, they're just happening often. And if there's something that has happened, I think, in the last year and 18 months, is that there has been this acceleration. E-commerce, I think, is a great example.
Yeah.
For all of the folks in logistics and just in general who are saying it's going to take a while before e-commerce gets to be this percentage of what people buy and sell. Well, 5 years of that happened in 1 year.
Yeah.
That accelerated. And there are some people who figured out how to respond to that, who had built something anti-fragile so they could actually be in position to serve 5 times the demand. But there were a lot of people confused, running around even more with their heads and on fire, trying to figure out how to just glue things together and survive. And I think that's a lesson for me, for Leaf, which is to say, don't try to tell me when the next hurricane is going to happen. Be more hurricane proof.
Yeah, that's a good one. So it's not just about the fast forward, the speed, how the global world is changing, but how quickly can we adapt to the future, let's say, changes, and how can we be, let's say, more ready, steady for these kind of things. Flexibility in a way. Like I was admiring one architecture. BBC report and video explaining, the how the buildings, even from made out of wood, in Japan, are really flexible and moving when earthquake is coming, and really strong earthquake. So just had the idea, that this flexibility of quite solid companies, buildings can be really important. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So we think about literally some of the words you just said as our products. So at Leaf, we have two products that we're using with customers right now. One is called Flex. It is literally about building flexibility into your planning, because whatever your plan is, some part of it is wrong. So flexibility, and then Adapt is the name of our other product. Is to say, however infrequently you thought you could get away with planning before, with this acceleration that we're all experiencing in real life, you need to use data and tools to adapt more quickly and more responsively. So those are two things you can do. Forecasting the next hurricane, well, let's put it this way: in the U.S., we have hurricane season for certain parts of our country that hurt the country those parts pretty badly. If you're not prepared with hurricane shutters, shame on you. If you're trying to guess which day the hurricane's going to hit right now, that's a different problem.
Yeah. It's just reminds me also of the quotes when we are discussing of not really big strategist, but a big fighter in a way, Mike Tyson, saying everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So it's not just about the plan, but also execution of these kind of things.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite, philosophers.
Oh, really? Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But no, but I think that's a great quote, right? Because in the end, we all remember being punched in the mouth. We remember the last hurricane or the last ice storm or the last,
Still hurts. Yeah.
New York. We still remember 9/11 very vividly. We'll never forget it. But like Daniel Kahneman talks about in Thinking Fast and Slow, what type of decision are we making based on just inertia versus decisive things that will allow us to change the trajectory, right, of our companies in this case. And so yes, it hurts to you had a plan until you get punched in the mouth, but then when you got punched in the mouth, and go back to COVID again, some of our customers had to shut down 30% of their supply chain, and yet total demand was where it would have been or greater. They had to ramp up other parts of their supply chain literally overnight. That's getting punched in the mouth in the supply chain. But if you had the bandwidth to say, or if you had the foresight to say, the 60% of the stuff that I'm doing right now that kind of just can run, and I've figured out a way to build tooling and machinery to just let it run on its own, so I can afford to pay the attention to the 30% that just shut down overnight, and the rest of the bandwidth for the stuff that I just don't know what's going to come next week. You would be much better off than if everything became a crisis at that moment, which it frankly did for a lot of people in transportation. And it's convenient to go back and say, well, who could have forecast a once in a lifetime pandemic, or just like who could forecast an ice storm or a hurricane? But it's like not having hurricane shutters. You should know better, because there's another hurricane coming.
Yeah. And actually, this kind of adaptation, flexibility, can probably also impact a positive change in the world. Not just everybody going in the same direction. I mean, it's like a train. But being flexible means that you can change, adapt the path and the growth, and also be faster in changing this route. Not just being fast on the tracks.
No, absolutely. And that's true even for one customer. There's some parts of their business that they want to basically, if the train's going to be slow, they want to buy an airline ticket. And then there's another part of their business that's like, if the train's, slow, it's still too, more than what I need. I actually want to build a pipeline, right? So, absolutely, that sort of adapting to really meet your own needs, because we're all capitalists. We're all trying to figure out how to serve the needs of our companies, our colleagues, our shareholders. We want to be better companies, right? Like, we're working with one of the largest beer companies in the world. They want to be a better beer company, I'm pretty sure. And just like Leaf wants to be a better technology and data company. Yes, there are things that we can do things about. There are things that we can't do things about. The things that we can do something about, if we're not using tools and data to do them better tomorrow, or building towards that anti-fragility, again, that's on us.
Yeah. Great. And if we move further, let's say from the global, we move to the more market level of value innovation and let's say purple not just purple. I mean, we have red ocean in a way, where there's huge competition. There's more and more competitors, and fast or slow, in many speeds. And we are always looking for our kind of our market. And what do you see on your market as biggest changes on your market at the moment, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of red in the water in our market right now. So
Yeah.
a lot of people are really hurting. They're, just, fighting as hard as possible just to get through the day. Um, but structurally, the market is set up as a red market, right? So in the US, for example, and I've had a chance to work in logistics in Europe and Asia and in other markets as well. But in Europe, the market is similar. There's obviously differences, but it rhymes. The problem rhymes across the globe. But we're working right now at Leaf on US market just to kind of really build out, a certain uh, set of tooling and technologies. So in the US, there's 350 to 400,000 suppliers for transportation, and then there's thousands of buyers.
Yeah.
And in that sort of market dynamic, since this industry in the U.S. was deregulated, trucking since the 80s, everyone is fighting each other. The suppliers are fighting other suppliers to try to get a small sliver of business. The shippers, the buyers are fighting against each other to try to get a truck from here. Can I get them to come from me as opposed to you down the street? And they're fighting each other, right? So it's an industry built on this notion of red and competition. Whereas at an industry level, about a third of the trucks run around on our highways empty.
Well,
Empty,
yeah.
right? Because you can only
One
fight the
third.
problem
One third.
one
Okay,
third.
that's
And I think
that's really
it's
big.
not that dissimilar as a global
Yeah.
problem. Um, but you can only fight the problem you see, right? So even if you're a really, really big shipper, a buyer, and you buy $1 billion worth of trucking every year, you're still dealing with 300 to 400 providers, and there's 400,000 or more. So you're just fighting in that little bit, and you're fighting, your direct competitors, the other shippers who are near your facilities, to try to just glue this together. If you see it as a competition problem, optimizing for the little mini network that you see, you're going to miss the ocean. You're going to miss most of the problem. And coordinating, so if I could find a truck that's going empty right past my facility and know that that truck is going empty, people have been, over the last 5 years, chipping away at that problem. But that requires a lot of luck, right? Like you need to find that truck running past your facility empty in that moment on demand. Now all of a sudden, I'm just going to go ask for that truck. But transportation, it's a big industry, and those 5 million white collar workers in the U.S. alone who work transportation every day, not
Pretty
drivers,
big.
5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these people are trying to not just make every decision in the moment; they can't afford to. That shipper with $1 billion worth of trucking a year has a million transactions, trucks that need to go from A to B,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So that's a lot of things. You can't do that all in the moment, right? That's not an on-demand problem. So how do you plan for that? If you plan for some of these shipments need to go between New York and Atlanta, New York and Atlanta every single day, now all of a sudden I start to see that there's trucks empty in Atlanta on a schedule. Not just right now happen to be empty in Atlanta, but they're going to be empty in Atlanta every single day. And what can I do to now take that empty truck and find work for him that keeps him fully loaded, that makes his trucking company more reliable and more profitable, and so he can always be there for me when I need to go from New York to Atlanta. But then as a society, we're making a dent in that 30%, maybe a third of the trucks that run around empty, uncoordinated. So we think of our role as planning and scheduling and coordination. And because of the way that we've been approaching it, it's been very much of, we are a little different. We are not trying to be one of the providers. We're not trying to be one of the buyers. We're not trying to be one of the many, many tools and providers in between that are trying to just help people connect to so they can transact. We're saying, no, 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 step above the fray. Look at this point, $20 billion or so of data that we're looking at continuously. And how much of the pattern now can you see in your mini network so you can operate that better, more intelligently, and with better reliability and lower cost, but then outside your network. And roughly, even for some of the very large shippers that we're working with, by millions of dollars of trucking every year, there's 1,000 times as many opportunities outside of their own mini network that there are inside to find efficiency.
It's great. Actually, you're directing exactly to the point of Blue Lagoon in a way. I wanted to ask, and you can really detect by this big data that you're analyzing, that you can detect actually the Blue Lagoons, not just for yourself, but for the whole industry, and actually find the market niches of the future, because there's money already spent that can be saved in a way, or that can be, opportunity for companies. Yeah.
That's exactly the way we think about it, and very importantly, there's not all of those lagoons that we can, as a company, go after. Frankly, we wouldn't be good at it. There are other lagoons that others are built to pursue more effectively, and our job as tools and data is to connect this sort of network of networks and expose those opportunities in a way so that these people who are building tooling now to go make another lagoon, work better, can do exactly what they want to do. But it's a network problem. It's a coordination problem. It's not just like we don't want to be all things to all people. We also don't think that there's some secret button somewhere that someone's just forgotten to press and everything would work better. It's much more complicated.
Yeah, and especially in these classic industries, when you look insurance, banking, tracking, I would say there's so much potential, and when I was comparing, for example, last time TNT, for example, as the service, and we were comparing where the investments are going by VC, and how many small mouses and already unicorns are stealing the cheese out of TNT. If you open their page, and every button you can find, there's at least few of them hunting exactly what you said, the small niche that they're doing perfectly, actually, and with much lower cost, because they're powered by VC. There's so much money invested, and it's all about the exit and not really making corporate goals on year to year. Yep. I can see really then moving to the next animal, and talking about the company size, in different sizes, different speeds. And when we compare data of 500 biggest companies in a way, and what's happening, it's actually in last 17 years, for example, 53% of all these companies were gone from the list, Forbes. Some of them, bankrupted, some of them were closed, but most of them were included in some M&A, to be swallowed, and in the next 10 years, this speed looks like it's going to be at least double. So we'll see in the next 8 to 10 years, there'll be another half of the companies gone from the list. So we see that really it's important to speed up, to fast forward actually the efforts on flexibility, on adaptation, on finding the opportunities in a way, compared to the classic ones. And it's not anymore so much important to be big in a way, but it's not only the big one eating the small, but fast fishes, eating the slow ones, in a way. Yeah. Here, can you tell us something about for example, your company, what you do and what you're planning actually for the future, how to speed up, what would you like to double down in your company now?
Yeah, I think the challenges are often trying to figure out the places where you can have a big impact by going faster, and using our advantages of being small and nimble, without getting distracted by the giant elephant-sized problem that's out there, right? And so, what I'm really, focused on, we had a couple of hour conversation, several leaders of the company just today, about is being able to tell the difference. Like, where are the places where we can and should focus right now, because it allows us to solve more of the problem differently, and have more impact. And telling the difference between those and a lot of the other problems that right now, yes, we could focus on them, but by focusing on them, it would actually distract us. And so I would say that, to the point where a lot of the companies in the Fortune 500 turn over, it kind of makes sense in retrospect, right? But that's easy to do, right? Like, you can go back and say, yeah, compact computers should have seen the cloud coming.
Yeah.
But that's fun for business school conversations. It's not really, or dinner conversations, I guess. But it's not really like, how did the decisions get taken and not taken along the way is sort of what I find fascinating. right? And so with ourselves, even as a 4-year-old company, but certainly at our customers, which are, you know, household names, like we'd recognize them. They have well-deserved reputations for being industry leaders, both on the supply side and on the demand side. I guess one of the things we're trying to get better at is figuring out the ones that are comfortable in their pain, as in they're just they're the compacts, right? They're doing things about as well as could be done. They've kind of given up on the fact that, or given up on the idea that it should be or could be done differently, or that it's worth it for them to do it differently. They're actually happy doing it the way they're doing it, and differentiating between those and the folks that actually are at least interested, if not committed, to doing it differently. And so in my consulting career, I remember one of the largest retailers in the world, working with them. Arguably, they were probably the best supply chain operators, the best supply chain infrastructure technologists of anyone in their industry, full stop. And yet they were doing work on assuming that in 10 years that everything that they had built that give them that competitive advantage today would be obsolete. And they as a company would be dead if they didn't do something that was like clean sheet of paper, start again, design the supply chain technology infrastructure of the future. We're looking for those types of customers, and that's some work we have to do more and more on the sales and our customer facing work, is to figure out the difference. Who's of what type of animal in that case, right? And we actually use animal classifications to help us understand who's moving like a gazelle and who's moving like an elephant. But then the other and continuous big emphasis is, I don't think you can solve this problem, the problems that we're looking at, throwing people at it, right? There are certain types of creative decision-making problems that people are incredibly adept at, but the volume of decisions that need to be made in logistics are so numerous that by throwing people at the problem, you actually are putting people in a position to solve problems that, frankly, they're not good at solving, and they don't really want to be solved. It's not a great job. Like being a truck driver is a pretty tough job. It has been. People don't want to be truck drivers anymore. But also the operators that do the work, the transactional work that I described before, that's not a great career. And so um, it, from a Leaf standpoint, the biggest priority is on building things with technology. Once you figure out the big problems, building things with technology that are at least 10 times better than the way that they're solved today transactionally with people being thrown against it. And the more that we can focus on that, and it takes a lot of debate because there are so many problems and so many opportunities to go pursue, but the more that we can focus on things that we can make better with tools and data, the more strategic it is for Leaf.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we just celebrated recently, 300th innovation sprint with one of the clients, and you say yourself, actually, each sprint when you start, okay, it's in some direction, but it's kind of the clean sheet of moving forward, and really. When you look at this company that received also $1.7 billion investment and everything based, on technology, we are building up for them. It's just giving us the perspective, exactly what you said, and where they are now, or where they are heading, it's very different than what we started, based on really flexible model of sprinting. And we see this, what you said, I mean, inside you have a culture, you have smart people in the company, but sometimes you have to combine this with people that are thinking differently. For example, on my executive MBA program, we have even artist in residence. What can we learn from art, from a violinist, from painter? In giving you totally different perspective of process of, like you said, decision making, or even making mistakes, or making a different process of thinking. That's a lot of things for companies and a lot of animals here in DC. And what do you see, for example, changed in the most about your, let's say, job, career, company over the course, let's say, of your career? How it used to be when you were consultant, or even before, and today, and where is going?
Yeah, I mean, so I hope I've changed and grown in that period too. And certainly, the kinds of work that I've been asked to do or I've chosen to go pursue has changed accordingly. I think the thing I think about most is, it's kind of like what I was saying about people deserve problems that are worth their talent to go solve. Like, why were we asking someone to do something rote and routine on a transactional basis when she could be adding so much more value somewhere else?
I love this one. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
But the idea that like that's on all of us as humans too, to kind of make sure that we're growing, and you know, understanding our blind spots and getting better at the things that we are good at and want to get better at. So, you know, I think as I, you know, early in my career when I started first working, it was just about could I be a reliable person, right? Could I be a safe pair of hands? There's a set of work that needs to get done. Can I get that work done? And learn from doing that work how I might do the work again the next stage. But I think, as you just said about, you know, these sprints and sort of broadening the universe of people you talk to, I've had the benefit of really working with and for some brilliant people. And some of those folks are working at Leaf right now. But then a lot of them continue to be part of sort of this extended network of experts and advisors. And that's, I think, indispensable. It's been indispensable for me to be able to go ask people who have done what they do really, really well, and they've thought very hard about it, worked and honed their craft. So getting that advice and, you know, making sure that that learning is being folded in for my learning or for Leaf's learning is actually, it's one of the things we talk about in the company a lot, the growth dimension. All of us have this growth dimension. If we want to keep moving as a company at this speed, then the people, the special talented people that, you know, are involved with building this company right now, how are they continuing to grow at a sort of an accelerated pace, you know? And one of the other things we like to say is we just have to be really comfortable being uncomfortable. That is not really what most people want in work, right? Most people do want to have some certainty and reliability. That's why we want to pursue certain professions, and certainly I did. And working for some company, like at a certain point in my career, it was nice to be at a bigger company, working with bigger companies. But, you know, for me personally, there was some screw loose, and I needed to kind of come back in and throw myself into the deep end and start learning again at an accelerated rate. And I think that's maybe a common sort of psychological defect in people who work at startups. But that's sort of part of the process, that, you know, there are folks that are they just can't do the same thing over and over again, hope for a better outcome, and be happy with that.
Yeah. When you mentioned startups, exactly what you said. I mean, it's the combination of, I mean, there's a lot of unsuccessful startups also, you know, in a way, but mostly starting students, they don't have any experience. They don't know even what is transaction. You know, people coming from big consulting companies or like you and from corporates, you know, having ecosystem, what you mentioned, and having talents around them, having people to ask. They know the industry probably, or they know the direction where they would like to, you know, fit later. And no matter that they have sometimes obstacle for entrepreneurship, you know, with, I don't know, wife, kids, mortgage, you know, everything else, you still, if you push yourself, like you said, out of comfort zone, you can get much faster investors. You can get much faster, you know, growth. And this ecosystem, what you mentioned, I think it's one of the really key elements that's giving you growth. So if your ecosystem is growing, if it's going in the right direction, like let's say that can support you, I think it's really important for the growth of the company. I remember also a story of Google guys, you know, explaining, you know, how the community of, you know, Silicon Valley and Sun Microsystems and everything else that was around them was really supporting the thinking, was supporting in a way investment and everything what was necessary. Also compared to, I don't know, starting in European countries or starting in somewhere else. Ecosystem itself, it's really influencing. I will study that more. It's really bringing me some new questions. And moving from the company side, we are moving slowly to exactly what you also mentioned, to differentiation. You know, Seth Godin wrote a nice book about purple cow. It's not just about the Milka chocolate, you know, but it's more about differentiation, how to do unsafe things, how to do how to say no to customers that you don't want to have, you know. And for me, I always it reminds me sometimes of music or some other things. When you have really lifestyle of some people or some music groups defining what they're not. They're not anything else. But if you look at metal camps or house music or some other polka or something, you have all the music, all the fans around that that are into it, or tango. It can be many things. And in this differentiation, it's pretty important to define probably also your product and your service in a way. How in this, when we look at your strategy of differentiation, what's your how do you position this? How would you describe this differentiation for your products and services?
Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot and have struggled with, because I think this dichotomy that you presented is very real. So even in the company that some of us at Leaf worked at as a startup in the late 90s, we had this slide I still remember where we said, there's this box of players that you understand, there's this other box of players that you understand, and we're sort of like neither fish nor fowl, we're this. And it made intellectual sense. It made us really hard to work with, right? Because people knew how to work with people in this box and people knew how to work with people in this box. They didn't know what this like fish fowl combination was. And so we learned a little bit. We're still kind of figuring out our way through, how to do this better, that positioning and the differentiation as you described for Leaf. We do very quickly in our intro, second slide often is, here's what we're not.
Okay.
Right? But again, people know what we're describing as what we're not very well. They don't know what we're describing very well. So I think there's still work that we need to do to kind of make much more clear what we are. But frankly, my hunch is describing what we are is a little bit too much of a distraction. Like, we're not a think tank and neither are our customers. And if we all had time and we could sit down over, a couple glasses of wine, we could talk about what we are and where we're going, and it'd be a visioning conversation. Oftentimes, or pretty much never, do we ever have that luxury. So instead, what we've been focusing on is this different thing that we're doing. How does it benefit you? Why do you care about the fact that we're different? Different. There's a lot of different things that are not worth your time. I don't listen to much polka music, but if I understood that polka music would do something for me that I care about, maybe I would. And so we're kind of focusing on, okay, just understand what we are by, to your point, what we're not. At least we can tell you that, and then let's tell you what we can do for you.
So maybe even in the future there will be some polka slide, even yodeling, if it works, so only if it works. But we just started with the process of branding in a way. What we tried to do in HTEC, but it took me 6 months actually to explain. It's nothing to do with the logo, but branding from the inside that I was doing with Leslie De Shonatoni. We did quite some companies last 15 years. What's your essence exactly? What you said. What does it? How does it make you feel? What are all the emotions that you can build around, and then build stronger based on this? What you are? What's your essence? How, the differentiation, the, let's say, vision, mission, and all the regular stuff. But in the core, it's really soft. It's not just one word. It's not just it's how and emotions are really included, not just in a way text or article or just one or just slogan that usually marketing agencies are putting, bank of kind people, or something, so it's beyond that. And when you look this differentiation also, how fast do you develop or redesign, for example, your product? Now, do you think it's speeding up? Do you have to adapt with in process? Let's say for you, it's moving faster now.
I'm sorry, is my connection or is it your connection?
Could be mine.
Okay.
Could be mine.
So, the products themselves, so Flex and Adapt, from the customer's experience standpoint, need to be reliable. They need to work. And so what the customer actually engages with at this early stage of our development is something that doesn't change that much from their vantage point. But on a daily, if not hourly basis, the underlying stuff that we're doing from a data or analytics or engineering standpoint is changing constantly. There's a lot of the way that we're working, like other, clients of yours. There is obviously defined processes for how tools and technology get developed and tested and iterated. We're constantly working on iterating faster to try to figure out how the outcome we're trying to deliver for the customer can be improved. But from the customer standpoint, we're like the duck on the surface of the water. We just don't see how furiously we're paddling underneath.
Yeah, exactly. I like the example. So duck itself, it's not as fast as I don't know, some other animals in the water, let's say, but exactly the movement, how much it's needed to stay on the water, let's say. It's really showing their few dimensions of this speed, internal, external, and definitely the perception that people see. Yeah. And moving fast forward all to the last animal, the butterfly wings, effect by Jacques Hadamard, the more than 120 years old theory. So it's moving to the personal, like you already mentioned. I mean, value that you want to add, and the talent of the people. That's important. But also, if you focus even more about you, what do you see as the biggest challenge so far? You faced in your career. How did you handle it? What was your personal challenge?
Oh, I've faced many challenges in my career, and I think the one that that's an example of something that I hope I'm trying to learn from and apply for what I'm trying to do as part of the Leaf team is one where very early in my career, maybe the second or third year into working, I got to a point where no matter how much I worked overnight and day after day and hadn't taken a vacation and everything else, there was only so much I could do. But I didn't recognize that there was only so much I could do, right? Without bringing other people in and kind of solving problems that actually weren't mine to solve, but they could be solved differently if I actually convinced somebody else to do something different that was in his or her interest, and now we could solve the problem together, and I didn't have to stay up till 3 a.m. I didn't realize that, and I got to a point of like real burnout. And I've tried to reflect on that over the course of my career to sort of say, where are the things that are the known unknowns that I can kind of think about differently from like the unknowable, right? And there are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of things that we'll only learn as we go through the Leaf journey as a team. But then there are things that are sort of knowable. We should know. We collectively have hundreds of years of experience with the problems that we're trying to solve. We have hundreds of years of work experience across us. And then, when you look at our advisors or investors or partners like HTEC, we have countless resources to be able to figure out what we should be solving and prioritize our work in such a way that it allows us to continue to make meaningful, maybe really fast but duck-like progress. And so that's, I think, the sort of the lesson I draw upon. Don't get to the point of like complete exhaustion where you're incapacitated, but also it's not just about work and work-life balance or something like that. It's just about being able to tell the difference between the $50,000 problem and the $5 problem and adjust.
Priorities in a way, and as person can burn out. It happened to me also. I was like that for 6 months. I couldn't use electric devices for 6 months, 6 years ago. And it's also company can get burned in a way with resources, with people, because we are, especially with entrepreneurship, how to say, attitude, because we want to go beyond. Everything is 10x. Let's go how we can make 100x. What's the speed? And we forget actually that we can burn not just people, but also company itself. Trying to solve too many problems at the same time and not fixing the most important ones. else. Yeah. And with solving these problems, what do you see as your superpower? What keeps you going through your toughest days? Like you explained.
Oh, I think I'd like to think that over time I'm getting better at being able to see the forest for the trees. And and again, that comes from observing and learning from other people who seem to do it better. And so I've had the benefit of that many times over, and I continue to look for that. Um, but just being able to understand, I mean, in consulting, we use the word strategy way too loosely, in my opinion. Everything is a strategy. But there are some things that are capital S strategic, and some things that are really, really important. And I think, there are times as all of us, kind of go through where we realize what some of those really important things are. Well, I think there's that same kind of approach that can be applied to a company and to the people you work with. They're kind of like a family. They're staying up all night working on your problems. Um, so then you owe it to them to do, I think, what you just said before, Nico, just make sure that we're working on the things that really matter. And we don't always get that right. I certainly don't always get that right, but I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. And I guess maybe I don't know if that's a superpower. It's certainly a super important priority for me as a person. Is I want to be able to listen and learn and grow so that tomorrow I'm more effective than I was this morning.
Yeah, yeah. I was discussing this just with Alex, I believe, 2 weeks ago. Exactly what you mentioned. How we can. It's just so time is limited. Resources. At the end, money is in secondary, but time is so much limited. You really have to find the way to optimize the efficiency, the effectiveness, the elements that can add value at the end also to you, to yourself. That you feel all this superpower itself, for yourself, because it's always question, what inspires you, what keeps you going, like Duracell, what's inspiring you, what's, for example, your ideas of must read, watch, or listen, that you stay inspired.
Yeah, I try to read as widely as possible, and sort of there's so much to consume in the world, right? But talk to people, gain from their experiences, sort of. So, for example, I often think about my parents' lives and in the world in which they grew up, and what gave them the courage to pick up a small family of 3 kids and emigrate to the other side of the world. And what was the motivation there, and sort of, are they happy now in the rearview mirror, seeing how their kids grew up, and what they were able to provide their kids, and how those families kind of came together. So for example, history is a huge interest of mine. I try to read from history, and but personal history is also obviously much more intimate and visceral. And so I try to learn from those things, and just sort of say, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, am I spending my limited time and my limited talents working on things that I will be proud of? And I would think that, for all these people and all these stories and all these resources that are out there, going back and saying, like presidential histories. I'm reading one of the LBJ histories. Lyndon Johnson was the president in America, and there's these wonderful sort of three volume biography written about LBJ by Robert Caro, and they're in incredibly research detail, and just kind of taking you through not just what the thought process might be, but all the other players and actors that were sort of around at the time. And just, what's fascinating for me is these were, in retrospect, with the benefit of history and hindsight, we can all look back and say, well, these were good decisions, these were bad decisions. But these are complicated decisions at the time.
For sure, yeah.
And so just what can we learn? How would I decide what the things that I have to do tomorrow? What can I glean from these? And there's lots like that. I just wish I had the time so that I could be a better learner.
Oh, that's you put it greatly. I mean, we learn every day. If we can learn to be better in any sense, that's improving also other people's, ourselves and other people also on the go. Yeah. And when you think of other people, who would you like to nominate? Is there any leader, that you would like to hear on Fast Forward in the future?
Oh wow! I mean, I think I'd love to hear from so many different people. I would love to hear from folks, given how fresh COVID and everything is right
Yeah.
now in the healthcare space, who might have had a chance to compress 5 or 10 years of sort of incremental, sort of chipping away at a problem into 1 year of really amazing work and transformation. So I'd love to hear from people in a couple of these sectors that I am, and I imagine a lot of us are really, really curious about these days, to say, what did we do differently? What did we learn? And what can we bring back to our companies and our lives around just those mindsets and, being open. So I guess I'm not sure anyone in particular comes to mind, but I imagine there's dozens and dozens of people that I'd be fascinated to hear about and from.
That are open and ready to share. Yeah. No, that's great. Great inputs, and thank you very much for all the answers. And we made a nice slalom around five animals, the big five, how I call it. I was once in South Africa, and they said the big five is the one. You didn't visit South Africa if you didn't go to see, the big five. And this, I changed the big five. I used the word, and actually this big five made as the pillars for, how to say, the key development that's needed in the company when you want to really fast forward. And I was testing this for like more than 8 years, and always when I tried to change something or skip one of them, it was missing. The big picture was missing in or one of those. And at the end, I would like to ask you also shortly about the HTEC. How do you see, what's your perception of HTEC Group, for example, today? How do you see it, or how do you see it in the future?
Yeah, so I think two things come to mind. One is, certainly from the time we started the company or shortly thereafter, HTEC has been sort of an extension of the Leaf team. And so we see HTEC as kind of working the problem with us, and iterating and learning and being sort of that furious sort of paddling duck under the surface. So very much that, the ability to kind of work at the pace and with the flexibility required as we figure out what we should do and how we should, build our technology to better serve the needs of our customers. The second is, it's fascinating to see HTEC as its own sort of growth story. So talking with Alex, yourself, and Dushan and other people over the years, you guys are hyper growth as well, and how you see the world. And I think the idea of being sort of this lonely voice on the outside, kind of hacking away at sort of established ways of doing work or being as companies, is a lonely job, right? And so just kind of talking with other people that are going through that experience is also kind of, it just kind of gets you out of the rut of the people, all of us at Leaf, who have to think about and obsess over the problems we understand or hope to understand better. And you can think about other problems from somebody else's eyes, but you could sort of see how they're learning and how they're growing and adapting. And so I think of HTEC as two things. One is a hyper growth, really fascinating company run by great people, who are also very open and can talk very candidly about what they've done well and what they would have done differently, and also as an extension of our technology team, as we build and iterate for the future.
Yeah. Thank you for the input. And I believe we can solve what they usually say in HTEC. It's not about time that you spend in the company or that you spend in your office or even now at home, but it's about the added value that we could bring. And the model that we try to bring in is how do we bring value, to clients, to colleagues, to teams, to mixed teams, with our clients. And it's really building us the challenge now, how we can get more inputs, and see what are the needs, how to understand better, your needs, other client needs, what's needed, and in this way to design the solutions even one step ahead that can be done, not just from technical perspective, but trying to help with you to predict what will be needed, that we can do also extended research and to understand better, your ecosystem, your needs, your field of opportunities, like we mentioned, and the market. Yeah. Anything else on HTEC to add? That's about it.
Well,
Yeah.
I for one can't wait to be able to travel again. And one of the trips that I would love to repeat is visiting with the HTEC team and having some of the conversations you just referenced, but to visit you in Belgrade. It's been a long time. It feels like decades. So I'm looking forward to seeing you guys.
That's one great input. And actually, with Alex, we already did the program, and we wanted to invite people, but it's just on standby, all this Corona. But I'm sure that next year it's going to be much easier. There, we have you in the program, so we would love to invite you and talk and do everything what is not for the recording, to just enjoy together and minds they think alike, and solve some great problems for us, for you, and possibly for the better world.